All right, welcome. Today, we're going to go on a little data journey. We're going to pull back the curtain on a typical hard drive and figure out what's really hiding on our computers, what our digital lives actually look like from the inside. You know the feeling, right? That dreaded storage almost full notification pops up, and you're left scratching your head. Where did it all go? Is it those thousands of photos you've been saving? All those documents from work? Well, let's actually find out. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we're not just guessing. We analyzed a massive data set. We're talking over 400,000 files, adding up to an absolutely staggering 8.7 trillion bytes of data. That's terabytes. This is a deep dive. Okay, before we get to the really good stuff, let's just make sure we're all on the same page about one key idea, the file extension. You can just think of it like a file's last name, .jpg for a photo or .pdf for a document. It's the clue that tells your computer what it's looking at, and it's the main thing we're going to be tracking. So, our first question is pretty simple. If we just count the files, one by one, what do we have the most of? We're basically looking for the biggest crowd in this huge digital city. And if your gut reaction was to say photos, well, you're pretty much right. It's what most of us would guess, and for good reason. But as you're about to see, that is only half the story. And the data really confirms that first hunch, big time. JPEG files alone make up more than a quarter of all the files in this entire dataset. Then you add in PNGs, which is another popular image format, and you can see our digital lives are just flooded with pictures. And look at this. Together, JPG and PNG files account for over 40% of every single file we have. So, case closed, right? The problem is obviously all of our photos. Well, not so fast. Because here's the thing. Having the most files doesn't actually mean you take up the most space. It's time to stop counting the files and start, weighing them. Let's find out who the real heavyweights are. And here it is. The big twist, the most numerous file, the JPG, doesn't even come close to being the biggest space hog. The undisputed champion of consuming your storage is the MP4 video file. It's not about how many you have, it's about how big each one is. This is the real list of suspects. You got MP4 videos way at the top. Then you have RAR files. Think of those as giant compressed digital suitcases that can be stuffed with tons of other files. And then you have these enormous files called VMDKs, which are basically an entire computer saved as a single file. You might not recognize all these names, but these are the giants quietly taking over your hard drive. Let me put this in perspective for you. Just these top 3 file types, MP4, RAR, and VMDK, they account for over 60% of all the storage space in our entire dataset. A tiny fraction of our files by sheer number, but they are absolute monsters when it comes to size. The difference in scale here is just hard to overstate. We're not talking about files that are just a little bit bigger. This is a totally different species of file. To really make this feel real, let's try an analogy. And this really just says it all, doesn't it? We get so distracted by the huge crowd of tiny houses, our 100,000 photos and documents, that we completely miss the handful of skyscrapers, the massive video files and archives that are actually casting the biggest shadow over our storage space. And if we look at the actual numbers, it gets even clearer. Let's start with the humble text file. On average, it's a tiny 158 kilobytes. That's barely a blip on the radar. Now, let's look at our most numerous file, the JPG. The average photo is about 2,000 kilobytes, or 2 megabytes. Now, that's more than 10 times bigger than a text file, which feels like a big jump, but just you wait. Because this is where the numbers get insane. The average MP4 video file isn't just a little bigger, it's nearly 200 times bigger than that photo, clocking in at an average of over 360,000 kilobytes. And the true beast? That average RAR file, that digital suitcase we talked about, it is over 1 million kilobytes. That's more than a gigabyte on average.
A single one of these takes up more space than 500 JPG photos combined. It's just wild.
So here's the bottom line, the single most important takeaway. When you add up just those top 3 culprits, the MP4s, the Rs, and the VMDKs, you find out that just over 2% of your files are eating up a whopping 60% of your storage. A few giants really do rule the land. So why did we just go through all of this? Because understanding this story has some really practical, real-world implications for how you manage your own digital life. This is the key. If you really need to free up space, don't waste your time deleting photos one by one. You could delete 1,000 of them and barely see the storage meter move. Instead, go on a giant hunt. Find and delete just one old movie you've already seen, or a huge software archive you don't need anymore. That can free up more space than hours of cleaning up tiny files.
So let's just recap the big lessons here. First, your drive is a story of 2 different groups: the tiny, numerous files and the rare, massive giants. Second, remember that the most common files are almost never the ones eating all your storage. The real villains are those video files and large archives. And the main lesson from all this? Be a mindful digital hoarder and always pay attention to the giants.
And that really just leaves us with one final thought. As our world gets more and more data-heavy with higher resolution video, bigger games, this trend is only going to get more extreme. So now that you know what to look for, take a look at your own computer with this new perspective. What giants are hiding on your drive?